My name is Geoff Wahl. I'm a professor at the Salk Institute. I've been here for more than 30 years, and my passion is cancer research. The reason for that is that I lost both parents to cancer, and I swore that I would do everything in my power to make sure that my children would have less of a chance of suffering a similar fate. And so I've devoted myself to understanding the molecular origins of cancer, the cellular origins, and how to treat cancer patients as individuals, because cancer isn't one disease, it's as many diseases as there are people who have it. This year, 1.5 million people in the United States will be diagnosed with cancer, and if you do the math, that's one person every 20 seconds. 500,000 people will die of cancer. That's about one person a minute. Our national investment in cancer research comes from the National Cancer Institute. The amount of money that is spent on cancer research nationally is $5 billion. From what I've told you, and to paraphrase Susan Love, who's a breast cancer surgeon and advocate, she said that the difference between a researcher or a physician or you or I and a cancer patient is one word, and that word is diagnosis. So we're one word away from being a cancer patient. So let's do the math. We put $5 billion annually into cancer research. There are 300 million Americans. I call this America's 4-latte solution for cancer. I think that this is inadequate. $16 a year is clearly insufficient to attack the multiple diseases that we lump into the single term of cancer. What impact would a sequester have on making progress against these many diseases and against the diagnoses that are sure to come? It'll be devastating. Scientific inflation is already high. It's higher than the average rate of inflation. We've had no increases in spending in cancer research in at least the past 8 years. And this has really eaten away at our ability to make progress. And in progress we have made. If I had more time, I'd tell you about it. But there are many people that are alive today that would not be alive, and this actually has had a positive impact on the economy. So we shouldn't just view research in cancer as a topic to help people, although that's why I'm in it. It's also an investment, just like investing in the infrastructure to improve roads and bridges is something that we need to do. Investing in cancer research is something that is an investment in the intellectual infrastructure. It's the kind of infrastructure that makes the revolutions of the future. And economists have estimated that for every 2% decrease in cancer, there will be a $1 trillion savings, $1 trillion worth of wealth put into our national pockets. This 2% saving has already been achieved. Just in terms of cancer research that's been done over the past 10 years, the investment in the Human Genome Project, which was actually an idea that was started by Renato Del Becco, who's a Nobel laureate and a former president of the Salk Institute, that research cost $3.8 billion. But the amount of wealth that's been generated from that and put back into the economy is $786 billion. It's a 200-fold return on investment. So investing in cancer research is an investment in our intellectual future. It's the internet of our health for decades to come. The Salk Institute has already generated the intellectual property to produce 33 companies in the San Diego area, 509 US and foreign patents related to cancer. Most of this has come from National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute funding. A 9% decrease, which is what's being talked about in the sequester, is going to have a dramatic impact because it's the kind of adventuresome research that has the lowest probability of being funded, and the sequester will prevent that kind of adventuresome research from being done. I have many other things I'd like to say, but I want to turn the podium over to my colleagues. And I just want to tell you that Jonas Salk, before he died, made the comment that we must always try to live to be wise ancestors. In this case, it means making decisions today will have a profound impact on future generations. The way we can be wise ancestors today is to make sure the sequester doesn't go through, to make sure that we fund important things that are going to have positive impacts on our health and economy, and one of the most immediate ones is supporting cancer research and other research supported by the National Institutes of Health. I'd like to introduce my friend, Bianca Lundeen Kennedy.
Hello, my name is Bianca Lundeen Kennedy, and I'm privileged to be here today to help speak on behalf of this cause. A little background, I've been in breast cancer advocacy for the past 11 years. I was first diagnosed with breast cancer in 2001 at the age of 35, and pretty soon after that, going through that experience where I had bilateral mastectomies and reconstruction, 6 months of chemotherapy, I became involved as an advocate in the breast cancer community through different breast cancer organizations. And one thing led to another, and I soon found myself privileged to be working for the Department of Defense's medically directed research program for breast cancer. And through that, I was very blessed to meet this fine scientist right here to my right, Dr. Geoff Wahl, at an Era of Hope conference in Orlando, Florida. The funny thing is, we actually met at the water cooler at the conference, and it was on the last day of the conference. We struck up a conversation at the water cooler, discovered that we lived about a 10-minute drive apart from each other here in San Diego, and he invited me very graciously to come tour the Salk, his domain for the past 30 years. And of course, I was very excited to do that. I came and I took a tour of the Salk, immediately fell in love with it, felt the energy of it, felt the energy of the science going on, and was very inspired. He also then graciously invited me to join his lab team as an advocate in the lab. So I have been an advocate in his lab for the past year and a half. And what that entails is going to weekly lab meetings, sitting in on those lab meetings to represent the breast cancer community, and in a sense, all cancers, and have a dialogue back and forth with the scientists. Every week they present their presentations on whatever topic it might be that week, and clearly some of it will be above my head as a layperson. But I have learned a lot of great scientific concepts through my time at the Salk. I've learned about crypto and chloroquine. I've learned about P53, and to be a very good layperson, I do my homework. So this is my molecular and cellular biology for dummies that I work on at home. So, but on a serious note, at the lab meetings, it is a wonderful bipartisan conversation we have. I'm able to put a human face before the scientist as someone who's a cancer patient. I was working with the Salk already for a year as advocate in Geoff's lab when I was diagnosed with a second breast cancer, which I've been going through this past year. And it's been an exceptional opportunity for the scientist in the lab to be able to see someone that not only is just a stranger to them, but someone they've gotten to know on a professional and a personal level going through breast cancer. So they've seen me go through some disfiguring surgeries. They've seen me going through treatments where I've come in one day bald. And they've seen me going through a lot of effects of chemotherapy, like a red steroid mask the day after my infusions. And but what they've also seen is that I've been in great spirits the whole time. And I have to tell you that being in the great spirits the whole time is because I'm very enlightened and fortunate to be enlightened by knowing that these scientists are here working round the clock in the trenches with a kind of drive and dedication I've never seen before in any other community. And what touches me is that so many of them are very young students, and they don't even necessarily know someone who has any type of cancer on a personal level, but they still are ready to spend every waking hour studying, working, trying to find that cure. So it gives me great hope, and I'm very privileged to see that up close. And I want to close with one more thing I'd like to mention. 2 weeks ago, Christy presented the lab presentation at the lab meeting, and she did an excellent job. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed her presentation. And there was an opportunity within the conversation when she talked about how much elevated risk there is for metastasis when a person has breast cancer while they're pregnant. And it was just a perfect opportunity after she talked about that for a bit, for me to interject into the conversation that I had lost a close friend of mine the week before. She was 35 years old, 2 weeks short of her 36th birthday, lost her to breast cancer. She had originally been diagnosed at age 26, originally at stage 1, but when she was diagnosed, she was pregnant. And the pregnancy just fuels the hormones in the body, the estrogen, and that fueled her breast cancer to one day show up as a metastasis. Her name is Meredith Lander Cobb, and I dedicate this speech today to her and her family. She is the mother of 3 young children, and I hope that this will underscore the significance that we cannot afford to have the sequester. We cannot afford to lose research funding, because if we do that, not only are we going to lose dollars, research advances, we're going to lose more human lives. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I just lost track of everything I was going to say, to be quite honest with you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here today and have an opportunity to speak alongside Dr. Wahl and Bianca and Congressman Scott Peters. My name is Mark Cafferty, and I'm the President and CEO of San Diego's Regional Economic Development Corporation. And after that remarkable presentation, the argument that I'm supposed to kind of present to folks is the economic argument for what the sequester means to San Diego, and why here it means more arguably than it does almost anywhere else in the country. The hard thing is to separate out the two, and so the Congressman and I had an opportunity to start the day today listening to the head of Navy Medicine talk about the remarkable work that's being done right now to help save lives, the young men and women who've been fighting for this country in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that we have more folks, we have more wounded warriors in San Diego and around the world than people have ever noticed or recognized in the past, and that's because the breakthroughs in medicine and technology are saving more lives. And more folks are coming home with the ability to be rehabilitated and re-enter the workplace and society and carry on their lives than ever before. And it was an incredibly moving presentation. But I couldn't help but think of all that stands to be lost when the funding cuts hit the military. And today, as I have an opportunity to visit the Salk Institute, a place that has always inspired me every time I've set foot in the organization. And I remember taking my first tour here back in about 2004 with students from around San Diego County, high school students who had never seen this place before, probably did not know who Jonas Salk was, but they couldn't leave here that day without being inspired by what they saw and what they heard in the spirit of this place. And what we learned that day was that this was built with the thought in mind that the best and brightest from around the world would come to San Diego to work collaboratively to solve problems and change our lives. And they've done that. And ironically enough, it might be a lack of collaboration back in Washington, D.C. right now that jeopardizes the funding for not only this place, but the incredibly special places throughout San Diego County that comprise our life sciences industry, our healthcare industry, and make us, by many standards, the number 2 biotechnology industry in the world, and in my opinion, the most innovative biotech sector in the world. And we can talk in military terms about what cuts to shipyards mean, and folks have to issue warn notices and get into the process and talk about what those positions look like and how many jobs could be lost. The harder thing to get your hands around is what this means to academic and scientific research. The slow loss of talent from the region that is working on the very same things that we just heard about, the inability in the future to bring those people here, it not only jeopardizes the cures for cancer and the things that we just heard about, it jeopardizes many of the breakthroughs that have ultimately let those wounded warriors that we started the day with continue their lives and maintain some level of ability to go forward and be productive and successful in the future. So with that said, I'm happy to talk about anything to any of the folks who are here today in regards to the economic impact to the region, but the one last thing I would end with is that San Diego's life sciences community, like San Diego's defense community, is beholding significantly to investment from Washington, D.C. There are many biotech and life sciences communities that are not. They don't attract the same sort of research and development grants. They're not built around research and development the way that San Diego is. And so when this sequester hits with no ability for the brilliant people in the room to make the decisions as to what gets cut and what doesn't, and as the president says, it takes a meat axe approach to the cuts that are being made, then we don't even get to have a dialogue about what breakthroughs do we need to save and protect, and what other redundant technologies do we jettison at this point and begin to look beyond. So with that said, I'll turn it over to a gentleman who I've been remarkably impressed with since he has gone to Washington, D.C. and listened to all of these issues when he was running for office and has immediately put himself in a position to talk about them and deal with them. And it's a pleasure to introduce Congressman Scott Peters.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, and thanks for coming today. Thanks to Dr. Wahl. Thank you, Bianca, for your courage and your testimony. And to Mark, too, for your leadership. I wanted to thank the Salk Institute for having us here, and we're lucky to have not just the Salk, but a number of institutions, including Scripps Research Institute, the Sanford Burnham Institute, UCSD, and some others that are all in the same situation with respect to the sequester. And as you've heard me say, I'm not happy to be here today. I would think that this was a week when we would be in Washington working on this. We have only 8 days until the sequester starts. But the leadership has sent us home. So what I'm doing this week is, while I'm back in the district, I'm trying to call attention to what some of the impacts will be on us and on our economy and on our quality of life. The work that Salk does is critical for us here, and the sequester would turn our back on the economic progress that you heard Mark talk about. And the long-term effects are even worse. There's stalled research, continued job loss, and a brain drain of top-tier scientists. Investments in science and research are key to America being a global leader in science and technology. In fiscal year 2012, San Diego firms received more than $130 million from the National Science Foundation and $850 million from the National Institutes of Health. It's these types of investments that have allowed San Diego to become the second largest life science cluster in the United States, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs and boosting our economy, and the sequester threatens that progress. The immediate cuts to NIH from sequestration are 8.2%, which is an equivalent to a cut of $2.5 billion. That's almost half the National Cancer Institute's budget, and equal to all NIH funding for heart disease, diabetes, hepatitis, and spinal cord injury. Francis Collins, the director of NIH, said that the cuts would result in fewer grants in 2013. Estimated to be 33,000 fewer research-related jobs in 2013, which would cause a decrease in economic activity of $4.5 billion. Cuts would lead to world-class scientists going abroad to pursue their research elsewhere, and we can't allow that to happen. And I'll just tell you the story when Salk had me out here to tour during the campaign. I had the chance to meet with a number of scientists around the table who compete for grants. And they expressed to me a concern that if we don't provide consistent and adequate funding for scientific research here in the United States, that kids who are thinking about where to get their education, where to start their companies, where to pursue their ideas, aren't going to do that here in the United States. They're going to do that abroad, because it takes till you're 40 years old or so to get that lab where you can start to write those grants and you can compete for those very competitive grants to fund your lab, to get those ideas started, to make those innovations, and even to start those companies. So we face the prospect that the next Google or Facebook or the next great cure for cancer would be developed by someone who's educated at UCSD, but then moved to China or Israel or Europe, because those places are the ones that support science. The sequester is exactly the wrong step. And like I've said, the sequester is not, we might not call it sequestration, we might as well call it amputation. We're cutting off our own limbs, our own economic limbs, our own innovation limbs, at a time when we all know that that's what's really important to our prosperity as a nation and certainly to this region. So I'm here, I should be in Washington working on this. Unfortunately, they've called a recess. But what I'm going to do while I'm here is make sure everyone understands what this means to San Diego. And really here, we're leading the United States. This is really an effect on America, on America's competitiveness in science, in innovation, in our economic leadership. This is really the wrong way to go. And I appreciate you all being here today to help me. And we'd be happy to take any questions.
what's the congressional argument right now in favor of sequestration?
Well, many people in the Republican Party say that we have to make cuts to the budget, and I understand that. And I think that there's a growing consensus that in the long term that the country has a debt problem. But I don't think there's any excuse for trying to deal with it in this meat axe kind of way. So whether you're talking about defense or science or you're talking about infrastructure, we all know we need to make investments to stay competitive in the next century, and we ought to be looking long-term how to save money. But we should do that around a table, not through this kind of approach. So I agree. Let's all talk about how we could save money, how maybe some of the tax breaks for the wealthiest corporations might be pared back because they don't need them, and how we might use that money for other things, part of it deficit reduction, but part of it investment in things like science.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
on that? I just want to emphasize that when you provide money for scientific research, it is an investment.
Right.
There is a return on that investment. Just the human genome sequence produced a 200-fold return on investment. The investment in cancer research, depending upon which economist you believe, it's probably 1,000-fold what's been put in. And with patients like Bianca, I can't calculate the return. And she's being treated with drugs that came about through research. Remember that the tagline for the Institute is where cures begin. They don't come out of thin air. They require persistent effort with adequate funding. Consistent and adequate funding, as Mr. Peters mentioned, are two things that we haven't had.
Because I learned that from you.
That's right. I gave you those
Consistent
words.
and adequate.
Consistent and adequate, and thank you for remembering that. And so we must have that if we are to attract the best and brightest. And I will tell you, it's already happening. It used to be that Chinese scholars would come to the United States because they knew that that's where they would get the best training, and that's where the best opportunities were, and they would stay here. Now what's happening is we're still getting the Chinese scholars, they're getting the best training, and they're going back to China because that's where the opportunities are. It's very interesting that American innovation and technology, which came about through the Human Genome Project, enabled the rapid DNA sequencing that we have. The Beijing Genomics Institute is now the largest DNA sequencer in the world with our technology.
Why is that?
Because they've made the investment.
China's made the investment.
The Chinese made the investment.
And you know, I think the other way to think about it too, and this is not a biological thing, but wireless and the internet were developed through basic science research grants from the United States. Imagine if Qualcomm had started in another country. How different would San Diego's economy look today? Well, those same kinds of economic benefits are coming out of this life sciences research, where we're the second largest life science cluster in the world, in the country, in the country. And we need the United States to get out of our way and to make sure that we're providing the support for those continued kinds of investments.
You said of the 33,000 jobs you say are going to be cut through these grants. Is there any way to quantify how many of those are going to come from San Diego?
4,500.
4,500. And you said San Diego got 1,760 grants last year, and you're saying that there's going to be 2,300 fewer. And when we talked the other day, you said there was a funding level in the past at 20% of grants, and it's down to 7%. What does that mean for San Diego?
Can I make this simpler for you?
Sure. I'll do the 20 and 7. I would like to tell them I remember that too.
So when I started, about 25% of all federal grants were funded. 25%. That gave you virtually all the science that you would want to be done. Now remember, you've got the smartest kids in the class competing in the hardest classroom that's ever been held. Now, 7% of all grants are being funded. Let me put it to you in school terms. You take the hardest class against the most brilliant students and you get a 93% on your final exam and you fail because you didn't get a high enough one. Which brilliant student is going to choose a career in this area when they have a 93% chance of failing? None. That's what you should write.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead. If I could add one more piece to that too, I think one of the things, so if you take a pretty conservative number like 4,500 jobs, every study that we look at would indicate economically that the loss of a higher wage, high-tech job in this region means the loss of another job. And in many ways, when we actually quantify things in San Diego, a job in our innovation economy, one job alone grows 1 to 2 jobs in our local economy. So when we think of the impact to folks who are doing the science or unfortunately unable to do the scientific work that we're talking about here today, we're forgetting that so much of this spins off into small businesses whose clients and whose customers are in fact the same organizations that are taking these cuts. In San Diego, we have over 100,000 businesses and 96,000 of them are small businesses. And again, getting back to the national level, the estimate is that this could take as much as a 3% hit. We could take as much as a 3% hit to our GDP. That would have any economists telling you that that will put us back into a recession, not just because of the straight numbers that you'll get from layoffs, but because of the lingering and continued effect that we'll have in the community when those folks aren't spending, they're not staying in those communities, and the small businesses that support any number of industries can't thrive.
On that point, could one of you talk really to the person sitting on the couch watching? Because first of all, I think a lot of people, if you go out to the street, they still don't know exactly what sequestration is. We've done dozens of stories
Right.
on sequestration as far as the military, but I think, we haven't heard much of other areas that it's also being affected in the interconnection, like sort of what he was talking.
It means a lot of losses of jobs right now. It means a gradual erosion of American competitiveness. It means you ought to get off your couch and let people know that this is outrageous. One of the big things is Washington, D.C. I heard one of my colleagues say, no one's talking about this back in the district. They think no one's paying attention. We ought to let them know that we're paying attention because this is unacceptable. It is not that hard to sit down around a table and make a deal, but you can't take a position, I'm not going to take $1 of tax increase, I'm not going to take $1 spending cut, I'm not going to let so-and-so get the credit, because what that means is that's a choice that people are going to lose their jobs, that we're going to lose our competitive future, that we may not find the cure for cancer. So we have these things within our grasp. If we just sit down and work like we've always done in San Diego, by the way, which is known for collaboration, not just in the scientific sector, but also among governments. We all seem to get along and work together, and we're not particularly backbiting. That culture in Washington needs to change, but it depends on that person on the couch getting up and saying, I've had enough, I'm really serious, this is ridiculous, and it really is.
So you have
Can I
8
give-
days until the cuts kick in?
Yeah.
How soon then could we see the effects if there is any?
Well, the effects will start pretty immediately. I mean, immediately, I know that in the military sector, for instance, they're talking about who gets laid off. And obviously, that's a big part of the thing here. But the sad thing about this is that it won't be visible, but it will be real. Because what you're going to see is you don't know when that kid's decided, you know what, I'm not staying in the United States to do science because I got no chance. But that's what's going to happen. There won't be a press release about that. The kid will just move to China or to Europe and start their company there and employ people there. And that's opportunities that our kids won't have, and you may never know about that. But they're very real.
Can I give you an analogy that may help the person on the couch? Instead of calling it sequestration, why don't you call it amputation? And you get to choose which of your limbs you want to lose, because that's what it's going to be. It isn't good for anybody. As Mr. Peters said, I think very clearly, it's an across-the-board cut without regard to program, as Mark mentioned. Everything. Take your pick. It's going to hurt. And in science, it's going to hurt especially badly because we're at the very bottom of the acceptable level of funding right now.
Thank you all for coming, and we hope we'll see you Friday. We're going to talk about impacts to the military as well. Thank you.